All right, so as you guys know, the bar business is one of the most challenged businesses in today's crisis. And we're going to explore a little bit about how the bar business can make it through COVID-19. My name is Paul Barron. This is the Barron Report. And with me today, I've got Jon Taffer, who is the host and executive producer of Bar Rescue. You know him as the guy for building back the bar business. Jon, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Paul. There's so much we have to talk about these days.
For sure. All right, Jon, my first question, I just want to jump right into it. And that is, let's talk about what the new bar is going to look like coming out of the pandemic.
Well, you know, I call this resetting America. And the reason why I call it resetting America is we're not reopening. Everything changes in so many different ways. This is truly a reset in a sense. And since it's being driven by the marketplace, not the operators, it's really almost the opposite of a revolution. It's a complete disruption to the marketplace as we know it. So we know certain things, and I've been speaking about these things for many, many weeks, but we know we're going to have spacing in bars. So obviously bar stools are going to be spread, tables are going to be spread. But let me just mention that there's bars in hotels. There's bars in Broadway theaters. There's bars in bowling centers. There's bars in restaurants. There's bars in concert venues. I'm talking about all of these, not just the freestanding bar. There's going to have to be a different level of spacing. We're also going to have to consider, how do we compartmentalize the aspects of our business? For example, I can't have a bartender handle money and then touch a glass. That doesn't work anymore. And they can't wash their hands every time they handle money in a high volume bar. 60% of their shift will be washing their hands all night long. They can't do it every minute. So I have to now compartmentalize the transaction part of going to a bar, because I can't have the bartender, in many cases, do the transaction. So in a restaurant bar environment, I then think of myself, okay, the food runner who brings the food, or the person who brings the drink to the table or to the bar, can that person handle money? Certainly not. Can that person pick up the plate of another customer and bus a table? Probably not. So we now start to create, in my view, three compartmentalized areas of our business. One is the transactional part of it. That must be contained in some way, either with a separate employee or processes to make certain that there's no contaminants out of that compartmentalized process. The next process is serving tables. Now, serving tables is taking orders, refilling water glasses, bussing tables, keeping tables clean and organized. That's a function that's critical, but that person can't really handle money because they're touching glassware, et cetera, but they also can't bring food to the table because they're touching dirty. So now I need a designated food runner. So bringing food and products out becomes compartmentalized. Serving guests becomes compartmentalized, and transacting guests starts to become compartmentalized. So if I have the same person doing these things, Paul, then I have to have some type of a wall around each of these functions so that it doesn't cause a bacterial contamination into the next compartmentalized function. That's the business in a broad sense now. And we have to apply what I just said to all of our various operations, but that's the beginnings of it. And it's very, very powerful. But Paul, if I can be a little more budget sensitive in this conversation for a moment, I happen to be developing Taffer's Tavern now in Alpharetta, Georgia. I know you guys know that. And it opens in July. We're under construction right now. And we've created the kitchen of the future. And we didn't do this because of COVID-19. You'd think we designed this kitchen after COVID-19, but we didn't. The kitchen was designed around the premise that labor costs were going up to $15 an hour. We had a limited labor supply pre-pandemic, and that most of our labor supply were new Americans who didn't communicate so well. So we wanted to create very simplistic kitchen operations. So we put in a sous vide robotic kitchen. You've never seen anything quite like this kitchen. It doesn't have a normal range, doesn't have normal cooking equipment. Everything is combi, computerized ovens, all contained within walls, flush mounted, and there's no raw product, no hoods, et cetera. So we've created these systems in these kitchens to deal with this now. But here's what's fascinating. When we created the Taffer's Tavern model, we realized, okay, if we have food runners running food to tables, and drinks to tables. And if we have a separate cashier or person designated for transactions, well, now my servers can do 6 tables, not 4. So one economic impact on the business has another economic impact in another area of the business. So we're seeing the cost in one area of the business being able to move resources to the front of the house and create a greater level of service. So through our kitchen design, we've eliminated kitchen staff by 40%. With the premise being that we can move more of those resources to the front of the house to protect the guest experience. But all restaurants and bars are going to have to think about this. How do I compartmentalize a transaction? How do I compartmentalize service? And how do I compartmentalize
And I think, so that's a great breakdown on really kind of how front of house and some of the operations. I'm kind of curious, when you look at design elements, obviously you talked about your kitchen and at Taffer's Tavern. Do you see within bar operations, because I'm thinking of my favorite restaurant, you walk in, the bar typically has 30, 20, 25, 30 seats. Obviously those can't be used right next to each other. How do you see a belly up bar being approached with this new normal scenario now?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and it's no different than the cashier's line in a supermarket. We're going to have to respect spacing in these bars for a while. Also, let's understand, a lot of times people are going to be wearing masks these days. So masks is not only something you're going to wear to protect yourself, it's going to be a courtesy to the people around you. So I believe it's going to be expected or anticipated that people wear masks. So how do you check IDs when people wear masks? How do you know who's on video systems when people wear masks? How does John meet Jane when people are wearing masks? So it creates a whole different level of doing business. Look, this is going to be an inconvenience to us as an industry. It's going to be an equal inconvenience to our customers. They're going to have to stand back 4 to 6 feet from each other and respect those kind of processes. They're going to have to maybe give us an extra minute or two to get products out because of the processes that we're going to have to implement to keep them safe. So this is an inconvenience to everyone. But you know what? We're both being inconvenienced because we want to be there. And the consumer will accept the inconvenience to be served by us, and we will accept the inconvenience to serve them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's a really good topic in terms of what is the consumer expectation. I think all of that is definitely shifted in the future. This will be interesting. I mean, I know you're in Las Vegas. It'll be interesting if you start seeing masks going into casinos, because that's a big deal in casinos, of being able to track who all's in there playing cards and stuff. Wow, I didn't even think about that from a standard of security and issues of that nature.
Oh, sure. And concert venues and all sorts of venues with security is important. This really proposes a threat to that. But think about this for a moment, Paul. We are in what I call the culture of accountability right now. If you went out to a restaurant, even before the pandemic, and had a bad dinner, man, it's up on Yelp, it's on the review sites. If you're a customer in an Uber car and you get a bad review, you're in trouble. So this is the age of this accountability. We've never had accountability to the level that it exists now. If we as restaurant and bar operators or casino operators or hotel operators or bowling center operators, we as what I call LBE operators, LBE being location-based entertainment, which is bars, restaurants, bowling centers, theaters, sports arenas. Anybody who's in the location-based entertainment business has to understand that if we prompt customers to act in unsafe ways, and there are contaminations that happen within our business, with the kind of knowledge and accountability systems that'll be out there, it could kill us. We can't have a second outbreak in our businesses. So that means we have to encourage people to wear masks. The ones that don't wear masks are putting us and our businesses at risk now. So this is a really deep calculation that we need to consider here. If we're worried about another outbreak in our business, and if we're concerned that, wow, if word gets out that there's COVID-19 in John's restaurant down the street, John's restaurant is now going to fail. And the second chance for John's restaurant to open is probably gone. So we have to make certain that these procedures are in place. We're not only protecting our guests, we're protecting our own businesses by doing this. That's an important point nobody's talking about. If we get flagged as a location where COVID-19 is cross-contaminated, we're in big trouble.
Jon, do you think that, because unit economics in this industry is kind of the basis of how you run your business. Obviously we're applying in labor, food costs, beverage costs, real estate, et cetera. What are your thoughts on unit economics? Because this, of course, is going to change everything from the amount of guests we can serve to the staff and team that we have to have on location to be able to serve that. Is it going to make a bar as profitable when you're looking at unit economics that maybe are a year old, because you're still, in some cases, maybe you haven't renegotiated your lease yet, what kind of challenges do you think operators are going to have and be able to just getting past that side of it from a financial standpoint?
Well, let's look at it by category if we can, Paul. Let's look at occupancy costs as a whole right now, which basically is rent for most people. There's never been a greater time for any restaurant to renegotiate with the landlord. Now, this is the time to do it. And simple switches like get rid of my base rent plus percentage and turn me into a straight percentage lease. So if I do less numbers during the next 3 months, at least I can still pay you 8% of my revenue, 10% of my revenue, but I don't have to pay you more than that. So we should all be looking at renegotiating leases and trying to get rid of minimum plus and just creating straight percentage leases. This gives the landlord a greater potential if we're really successful on a high end when revenues are high, but it protects us on the bottom end. So I would start by looking at those types of protections right now. I would also read out to other fixed costs like insurances. Volume is down. That volume is down. That should affect dram shop liability. It should affect other insurance costs. There's an opportunity to fix that as well. Next, when we take a look at economic modeling, we need to understand that as an industry, and there are people going to hate me for saying this, we have to get away from third-party delivery services. We can't afford it. And they need to understand that either they're going to drop down to 5%, or a number that we can live with, or we are going to do this on our own. And companies like Shift4, right, who's a big POS payment company, just announced that they have something called SkyTab, where now in about 10 minutes, a restaurant can set up their own delivery service with transaction and everything online. So we are getting there. Here's what I think. I think that labor models change in that we're going to have smaller menus going forward in all probability. That's going to affect our kitchen model. We're probably going to have narrower food inventories. We might even have narrower beverage inventories. I mean, the days of 60 beers might be over. Now maybe we have 25 beers and we don't use all of those taps. So when we look at the narrowing of inventory, then we look at the shallowing of inventory. We're not going to carry as much of it. That number changes. Now our kitchen model probably changes on our reduced menu. And when we reduce our menu, we should consider kitchen labor modeling in the way we reduce those things. Do we have to have a fryer station, a salad station, and a broiler station going all the time so we have to man 3 people? Or is there a way to design our menu so one of those 3 people can be eliminated? And I'm not suggesting even eliminating them. I'm suggesting taking those resources and moving it to another area in the front of the house. So when we take a look at menu engineering, labor needs to be a great consideration. I think as an end result, we're probably going to reduce menu size by about 30% as an industry, is my guess, maybe 40. And I also think kitchen modeling will go down also about 25 to 30% as a result of that, or the ones that are smart, right, and design those menus properly. So now when we take a look at front of the house, I probably have to designate a food runner. If it's a bar environment, I probably have to have a bartender and, dare I say, somebody else doing transactions if it's a busy bar, because the bartender can't wash his hands every 60 seconds. So we have those compartments I spoke of earlier. That might add some front of the house labor cost. I mean, we might need to have somebody standing at the front door taking people's temperature with a digital thermometer. We don't have a labor model for that. You know, we might have to have an additional hostess in the front managing. We might have to move a POS system to the hostess counter. Paul, you know, I've been looking at the old diner model. We pay the cashier on the way out. Of course, that's a very safe model in a COVID-19 world. I now have all the transactions compartmentalized and isolated there on the way out of the restaurant. So servers aren't involved, food runners aren't involved, managers aren't involved. These are the kind of things we need to look at as an industry today. But now I'm adding that labor cost to the front. But again, when the server isn't doing transactions, I can probably give them an extra table. Remember, servers aren't bringing food out of the kitchen now, a runner is. Servers aren't doing transactions in theory now. So there's efficiencies that happen in certain areas of the restaurant as we allocate resources to other areas. All in all, my point, I think we lose about 2% in operating profit. And I've taken a look at delivery as its own model, Paul, right? And obviously in a delivery model, we don't have front of the house labor costs, but we have packaging costs. In our in-house costs, we don't have the packaging, we have the front of the house labor costs. You need to look at them as two separate businesses and two separate models. And here's why. When we open, you might run 70% delivery or curbside pickup, 30% in-house. I believe 3 weeks later, it's going to be 40-60. A few weeks later, it's going to be 50-50. A few weeks later, we'll drop another table in. A few weeks later, we'll push the bar stools a little closer. So I think the model is going to evolve over the next several months.
I love the fact that you're talking about getting away from third-party delivery. It's one thing that I'm a big proponent of. I think it's been a long time coming. I think this is our window to actually do it, potentially with labor pools opening up a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about technology, though. Bar technology in the past has been fairly limited in the industry. Obviously, contactless payment will be a big shift we'll see as we go forward. What are your thoughts on how technology could implement into the bar business in the next few years?
Well, things like SkyTab, which I've of course shown on Bar Rescue many, many times, happens to be the Shift 4 payment process. SkyTab is beautiful. You drop it on a bar, they swipe their card. But now there's a new type of a credit card processing where it's more of a gun, if you will. You hold it out, the customer puts the card in it and swipes it. So I think these technologies are going to be very, very important. We have to understand that one of the dirtiest things we deal with is money and credit cards. So that transaction, that part of our business has to be isolated either through technology or through human resources. Technology is the great answer. I think that becomes powerful. I must say, guys, and you're going to think I'm crazy, I think smart bars are going to come back. And look, nobody's a bigger fan of the bartender than I, and the customer interaction and the connectivity and all of the elements that a great bartender brings to a business. But smart bars and computerized bars are something that's pretty powerful right now. And in these lower volume environments, smart bars might be the way to go. In a smart bar, a customer can walk right up to, push a button, and it dispenses the drink to them. They make about 700 to 800 drinks. I just had one in the VFW episode, Bar Rescue, a few weeks ago. But these computerized smart bars are pretty impressive and provide an interesting resource for slower volume operations. They don't work in high volume, but in slower volume they do. I think these are the technologies, Paul, that people are going to be looking at.
A wealth of information here. Let's talk about kind of the future of the operator themselves. Capital is going to be less available. We're going to see kind of a shift in really kind of the strong surviving. So we are going to have a basis of some pretty strong operators out there when this is all over. What are your thoughts on who that operator is? What's the DNA of that operator? I know this is right up your line in terms of Bar Rescue, but how are they going to go forward?
Well, the positive side of all of this, if there is one at all, really, Paul, is that great marketers will bubble up to the top. Great operators will bubble up to the top, and great promoters will bubble up to the top. And it is those operators who do those things who market in an innovative way. Let me give you an example, Paul, if you don't mind. Yesterday, I was on social media a couple of days ago, and I see a picture on social media of a cook in a kitchen, and he's laying a lasagna noodle in a baking pan. And the post over the image is, our world-famous lasagna will be ready for curbside pickup at 5 o'clock. Okay, pretty noble post, right? They're doing the right thing. They're showing fresh, but the guy's wearing street clothes. He's not wearing a hat. He doesn't have a mask on. He's wearing the clear plastic, throwaway gloves. There's no difference in the imaging that we're providing to the consumer. Here's the huge change in our business going forward. Paul, if the restaurant that makes your favorite hamburger in the world is dirty and disorganized right now, not quite have it together, but the restaurant that has your second favorite hamburger is visually tight systems, you just feel safer there. You're going to go where your second favorite hamburger is and walk past your first favorite hamburger because of trust. And that has never happened in our industry to this level ever before. Trust goes before product quality, believe it or not. I'll have an inferior burger, but I got to trust the place or I can't go. That changes everything. So the operators that embrace that trust, the premise of trust in their imaging on social media, in the words that they use, in the way they communicate with their employees, yes, in the way their restaurants and bars look. When I walk through the front door, it better look different. If it doesn't, you didn't do anything to assure my safety. So I want to see these things because trust is hard to develop, Paul. Trust comes from transparency. In Taffer's Tavern, we put webcams in the kitchen. So you can just open up your phone and look at your food in our kitchen being cooked. We want that level of transparency. We need to build back trust that a virus took away. We didn't lose it. It was taken from us. I get that. But we have to build it back. So trust becomes critical in the way that we operate now. That's a big change. So how our employees are dressed, who's doing what. People are going to be watching right now, and they're going to be very sensitive to these things. So we have to perform within their expectations now.
This has been great having you on the show. Thanks so much. I mean, these are, I think, industry-leading expert topics, and definitely appreciate having you. So thanks for stopping in.
Oh, my pleasure. Again, the last question that you asked, great operators are going to succeed. We're going to see some great innovations during these times, Paul. We really are.
All right, thanks to Jon Taffer for joining us today. And of course, if you're listening to this, whether you're over on Spotify, maybe you're on iTunes, make sure and give us a rating over there. That's how we get great feedback from our audience. You can also hit me up on Twitter at Paul Barron. And if you have a great idea for us covering something here on the Barron Report, make sure and shoot an email to us, which is producer@foodabletv.com. That's the way we get ideas from our audience. And of course, if you've got a great operator that you know is killing it out there, those are the perfect people to send our way. We will catch you soon right here on the Barron Report.